The following video features excerpts taken from 4 recorded live lessons on drawing with Inktense pencils. To learn how you can access this complete video series, as well as our complete library of recorded live lessons, complete video courses, ebooks, lesson plans, and much, much more, visit thevirtualinstructor.com/members. As I mentioned before, we are going to be working with Inktense pencils now. These Inktense pencils are made by Derwent. So that is a brand name of pencils. And so in other words, there aren't generic versions to my knowledge. I'm pretty sure that Derwent is the only manufacturer that makes a product like this. And it says water-soluble ink pencils. This means that the material in the pencil is actually ink. So they're going to behave slightly differently than watercolor pencils, with watercolor pencils. And of course, the assumption is that since they can be activated with water, like watercolor pencils, then the assumption is, well, they must be exactly like watercolor pencils, but they're not. There is one major difference between these and watercolor pencils that we've got to be aware of right from the start. These are permanent, and once they are dry, they cannot be reactivated again. And I just want to tell you that you'll notice right off the bat, or maybe you'll notice like I did, that the colors that are presented in the end of the pencil, as we see here, this looks like a yellow-green. But then when we look at the end of the pencil, look at that brown color that it shows up here. And the actual name of this color is mustard. So, and it might be really hard to see that. So, we've got to make the assumption that this is kind of a yellower color than what is believed to be over here. So it might take a little bit of experimentation with the pencils on a separate sheet of paper to really get an understanding of what type of colors are going to find their way into your painting or / drawing. So I'm going to make a few marks here with the mustard color, and I'm going to adjust the amount of pressure that I put on the pencil. So I'm going to put heavier pressure here at the beginning, and then we're just going to lightly let that fade away. And I'm doing this because I want to show you just how intense the Inktense pencils are. I had to really walk slowly through that statement. All right, now I'm going to grab a larger nylon brush and put a little bit of water on the brush here. And then right over the top of the color here, you can see it becomes activated. And you can see just how strong that color is right off the bat. Now, you might also notice that some of the marks show through, especially on a textured surface like this. Of course, you could experiment with some hot press watercolor paper. Of course, that's a little bit of a smoother surface if you don't like that little bit of texture that comes through. But you can see as I continue to work the color on the surface that those little marks that show through kind of disappear. But it might not be a bad idea to have some of those marks show through depending on the subject that you are doing, especially if you have some type of textured surface. Photo reference, we're going to be doing some strawberries here. I thought that this would be simple enough as far as the shapes go that we can get past the drawing part as quickly as possible. It is going to All right, so we've got several shapes there, and every once in a while just stop and evaluate and kind of take a look and compare and see how close we are to getting everything laid out. And we got bunches of leaves coming out on this side, so all right, so I'm basically just kind of looking at the darker areas, and I'm not going to let the texture of the paper bother me too much. In fact, I kind of like the texture of the paper because I can kind of gently lift the pencil up to create a little bit of a lighter application where it's just kind of scraping the top of the tooth of the paper. So I'm just going to put a little bit, just a very light touch in some areas where I do want to have some of that yellower green, if that is accurate. Not real sure where I want the green to be a little bit more yellow without adding that super bright yellow in there. And I do think that the leaf green here, when we activate it, it is going to have a little bit of that yellow in it. Close. Let's start in a good place here. We'll start right at the bottom. And again, I want to make sure I don't have too much water, so if I get a little bit too much water on the brush, I can kind of dab it off on the side. And this is the little area, remember, that we wanted to, you can see how dark that is. These are the little pieces that we wanted to make it look like it kind of curved up there. All right, so see this little strip right here, I want to be a little bit lighter. So I'm going to stay away from those areas that are stronger and let that area be a little bit lighter. And then we'll go back and get rid of, I just want to get rid of some of that graininess there. Areas of highlight. And what I'm likely to do here is I'm going to put some of the color down, and I'm just going to pull some of the color with the brush to indicate those areas of highlight. So I'm not actually going to put any color down where those highlighted areas are. Instead, I'm going to put colors around them. And remember, we can build up colors on the surface. So we don't have to put down all the colors initially. We can put down some of this poppy red here and then go back. See, that's just with a touch of water. And like always, don't get too concerned with whether or not it looks exactly like your reference, if everything's exactly the same, because honestly, it never will be exactly the same. There will always be little tiny differences. So I'm trying to be real careful that I don't get too dark and too strong with the color, if you haven't noticed. And I could be too apprehensive with that if I'm not careful. All right, so a little bit of the Shiraz here, down here in the shadowed areas. And we still want to remember the texture here, so we'll still put some indications of some craters there. And we'll darken up some of the areas around the seeds as well. Let's get started here, and it'll give us an indication of how strong this color is going to be when it's activated. And if we keep rubbing water on it, the color is going to get too intense. So I'm kind of just touching it and allowing a lot of that white to still show through. And of course, one of the advantages to using the Inktense pencils is we can create multiple applications and create glazes. In this case, I went ahead and put several different colors on the surface, and I'm activating it after putting those colors down. But if you would rather put down the color, activate it, and let it dry, of course, you can do that as well. And it doesn't have to be the exact pattern. That's what I did on both of these strawberries is I just kind of put some seeds in there. Now, over close to the edge, they're going to get closer together and they're going to get flatter. Same thing right here. They're going to get closer together and get flatter, but right here in the middle, just keep them evenly spaced out. Strawberries are going to grow naturally, just like anything else that grows in the wild. So it kind of seems like they're kind of set up on a diagonal pattern that repeats, but there's a little bit of deviation there. And even in the side of darker value, this entire left side of the strawberry is mostly darker in value. There's still some areas of highlight that happen here. So since we're going to be preserving these areas, we're going to leave some spaces here. And our highlights don't have to be exactly in the same place as they are on the photo reference or within the photo reference. They just have to be there. And those little things like the highlights make a huge difference in whether or not it translates representationally or not. We'll let some of those lighter values happen in between and then go back and get some of those darker areas that happen in the indentions on the strawberry. All right, so over here we've got the strongest area of light hitting. So I'm just going to make sure that, and of course we have less of the material on the surface too here as well. So I'm going to try to be very light with the brush and make sure I don't get too dark here. Don't activate too much of the color. Okay, so you can see how that little activated area right there is making a big difference. And I'm using the smaller brush there just to give me a little bit more control. Might pull some of that color right around here. Intense. And it doesn't take a lot of material on the surface for them to become so intense. So as we're making these applications, we're going to consider that. And we're not going to put the material down too heavily because we can always go back and make the color more intense or make the values a bit darker if we need to. But if we get too dark, then we can't go back on that. And I'm going to leave a couple of areas of highlight, even over here and where the shadow gets a little stronger for the time being. If that little highlight right there appears too strong, I might just swipe right over the top of it. But for right now, I'm going to preserve it. And of course, as we're drawing out the strawberry and getting all of the indentations and things in place, it doesn't have to be exactly like the photo reference. And again, that's something that you'll hear me say over and over and over again. All right, so let's go down here on the bottom. And of course, naturally, we'll have some darker value that happens down here on the bottom, but you might also notice that there's a little bit of lighter value that happens down here on the bottom too. You see that? That's coming from the reflected light that's hitting the surface and bouncing back on the underside of the strawberry. Now, and it might not be very clear that there's a difference, especially on the feed here. It's definitely clear to me with the materials in front of me. Let me just zoom out for a second and see if you can see a clear difference between these strawberries that we've addressed, all 4 of these, and with the tangerine and with the Shiraz. And on this one, we've just put the Shiraz without, and of course the poppy red without any of the tangerine. And you can see it's different. You can see that these have the orange tint and this one's missing it. So, you know, it's just three colors. It's not like we're getting crazy with the colors here, but it does make a difference. All right, before we activate it, since it was asked earlier if you can just layer the colors without activating it and then activate it after they're layered, let's do that now. I'm going to use a little bit of deep indigo, and this of course is a blue, and I'll create a little bit of a bluish tint to some of these shadows. Now you can take this as far as you want, and of course there are several places where we have the opportunity to do that, but I'm just going to apply it in a couple places for now. And then we'll just continue on up here. And now that blue that's in there is very, very subtle, especially when it's mixing with the bark. I should just say dark brown instead of bark. I'm having trouble saying bark. It's pencils to that. So to define these shapes, I'm going to actually use a graphite pencil, and I'm going to very lightly define the darkest areas first. And I'm just going to draw a contour line here to indicate that strong shadow. And there's a little bit of an area where there's some light getting in over here, so I'm going to kind of make a note of that. We've got another strong shadow that's happening right here. And oh, by the way, we're addressing the strong shadows first. If you didn't notice that already. Activating it, we're actually going to get a little bit of water on a brush, and then we're going to kind of lift the color from the end of the pencil, just like so. and then we'll use the test strip. And this is going to be really strong when I first put it down. You see how strong that is? But if I add a little bit more water to it, we create almost a wash, a little bit more water, and now we've got a wash where we've got a lot of control over it, and we can apply it very lightly at the beginning. So I'm going to go right up against the edge here, and just like with watercolor paint, we're going to make an initial application. I'm going to work quickly, and while this is still wet, I'm going to try to cover this entire area so that we have a nice even application. Now, of course, this is not as dark as we're going to make this. And then we'll grab some of the indigo blue or the deep indigo, and we'll put some of that over here. And now we can get a little bit of water. And then we'll go right back over the top. And again, we'll try to work quickly because this application dries very, very quick. All right, there we go. A little bit of the bark and a little bit of the deep indigo. And again, right underneath here. Now, these shadows are a little bit more of a purple color here. I'm going to let these be a little bit more of a blue, though. Just want to bring that up a little bit further. Just so we have a hint of some of that light that's coming in through the backside. And actually, while I've got some of this color on the brush, I'm going to clean up some of these white lines that are happening here. Just kind of get rid of them. If you're ready to learn more about drawing and painting, then why not check out our comprehensive membership program, which includes video courses, live lessons, ebooks, lesson plans, and much, much more. To learn more about the program, just click on the button in the center of your screen or click on the card in the upper right-hand corner. Thank you so much for watching.